this is a great example of this game of like, hey, when the offense needs to pick the defense up, they did it. When defense could help the offense by getting a critical stop because we weren't able to get the ball to negative territory, we got the stop. So that's what you have to play complementary football. You got to, and you need your leaders to show up in those critical moments, and he did that. And I thought defensively the guys did the same thing as well.
That's your coach, Mike Macdonald, as the Seahawks moved to 2-0 on the season and all alone in first place in the NFC West, a 23-20 overtime win in New England this week. The he was talking about in that comment was Geno, but specifically I wanted to start with that take because it sort of sets the stage for a lot of what we're going to talk about here over the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, reacting to this game. Welcome to Seahawks Forever. I am Dan Viennes. Let's get this going, shall we?
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
Welcome back. Big win. First time in Seahawks history that a new coach begins his coaching career with a 2-0 record, winning his first two games. And this one, the theme of the day is going to be, this is still a process. And we talked a lot over the last 2 weeks about how week one tells the most lies. And we find out more about teams week two. We see the biggest adjustments. We see the biggest swings. In some cases, we see teams fall back down to earth. Unless you're the New Orleans Saints, of course, who had that on their bingo card to start the season. But in this game in particular, Baker Mayfield was interviewed after their win today, coming off the field, and he said something along the lines of, you learn more in a loss, or you can learn a lot from a loss, but it's better to learn those same lessons in a win. And that's what I was thinking today. There was a period late in the third quarter when the Patriots took the lead, and I thought, okay, well, we said there were going to be games that you lose that you don't expect to. And then along the way, there are going to be wins that you don't quite expect either. I thought maybe we were headed towards one of those this weekend. I was going to come on here prepared to talk to you about how we're still learning about this team. This is a coaching staff still trying to find themselves and establish a culture and a style of play. And it wasn't going the Seahawks way. And then they end up, as they did so many times last year, Geno Smith with 5 fourth quarter comeback wins last year and fourth quarter overtime to lead the NFL, 7 over the last 2 years, does it again today. There were a lot of factors that went into this. There's a lot of good to talk about. There's a lot of bad to talk about. I want all your comments. I want your takes. I want your questions. I apologize for something is going on with my Twitter account. And I've just sent in some support requests. It drives me crazy. I don't understand. I go to start the live stream and it tells me that you have to have a premium account on Twitter in order to go live. I've been paying for a premium account for a very long time. I went in to verify that. And indeed, there it is. The money's still coming out of my account. And then suddenly my check mark switched from blue to under review. So I don't know what's going on. And that means that a lot of you aren't seeing this immediately, aren't seeing it live, aren't able to hop in and react to it right away. And also, it's a bummer because when you comment to this live stream on Twitter, your comments show up and I'm able to show them on the screen. I won't be able to do that today. So I apologize for that, but I can still get them through YouTube. And I can't wait to see what you all think of this game and react to it as well. I've got a little more sound from Mike Macdonald's post-game press conference. This next one is along those same lines, and then we'll talk more about some of the specifics and about how, look, not every game is going to be pretty. Fans want it to be. Fans all want, as a general rule, perfection. And you can come in, saw a lot of it this last week. Seahawks won 26-20. It was really a 2-score win. The Broncos come back late and tack on a touchdown. And there was so much good stuff to talk about, but everybody wanted to focus on the negative. And sometimes you just can't win even when you're winning among the fan base. And I'm the same way sometimes. You want everything to be clean. You want to see a path to championship contention, and the teams that do that consistently week in and week out are successful in just about every phase of the game. But then there are weeks like this. And this is kind of what I expected when I was on with Fitzy from WEEI on his show. If you haven't checked that out yet, very interesting. Be interesting to go back and look at it now after we saw the results of the game. I called a 17-13 win for the Seahawks, but I said it would be sort of an ugly mutter type of game where it wouldn't always look pretty, but they would ultimately, their talent edge would win out and they would get the win. He felt similarly, but he picked it for the Patriots 23-20. Had the score right. He had the wrong team, but I was right about this, about kind of how these two teams went head to head. And here's the reason. These teams are more similar than you would think they are different. That, I mean, there are some stark differences, right? The Seahawks clearly, and they showed it today, we're going to get into the stats, have the better group of offensive weapons. Although the Patriots on the outside, for certain, although the Patriots today imposed their will in the first half using their tight end position and running the football as they did last week against the Bengals. And that's where it gets into the similarities of these two teams. Two young head coaches, defensive-minded, who want to play physical football, dictate terms on defense, stop the run, and also have a physical running game to complement an offense that the Seahawks have a much more realistic expectation this year of having a dynamic passing offense than New England does, with Jacoby Brissett at the helm and also just some shortcomings on the outside. But as the game went along, we saw a fascinating give and take, some chess match stuff between Ryan Grubb and Gerard Mayo and Mike McDonald and Alex Van Pelt. Two guys that are very familiar going against each other, with Van Pelt spending those years in Cleveland, seeing the Ravens head to head twice a year. So this is what McDonald had to say about that sentiment, about how, hey, it's not always pretty and you have to make adjustments as the game goes along, but we got it done.
They did some good things on offense in the first half on third down, so we had to make a couple adjustments. You know, they're hitting the tight ends, so we had to adjust a little bit of our rush play. But this is what happens. It's the NFL. Like, teams are going to have good plans. You're going to have to kind of understand how they're attacking you and then kind of move and shake from there. So the guys did a great job of kind of going to the next things and playing some of the plays that they were running against us. And I thought our rush started to come alive in the second half. Would have been great to get him on the ground more, but you know, Jacoby, he's a really good player too. You know, he understands that. I told you he was elusive, and he got rid of the ball in some of those critical situations.
Story of the first half, Jacoby Brissett to Hunter Henry. Henry at one point was 7 for 99 in the first half. And Jacoby Brissett started the game 7 out of 7 for 64 yards. Most of those went to Henry. Again, Henry 6 catches, almost 100, or 7 catches, almost 100 yards in the first half. A couple of them were big third down conversions. And Seahawks just didn't have an answer. But then they adjusted, moving Julian Love into position to defend Hunter Henry. After that point, Jacoby Brissett went 4 for his next 14 after they moved Love over to guard Henry. So that's just one of the adjustments. The other story of the first half was the Patriots imposing their will in the running game. Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. And that was a little bit of a surprise for me. You know, Gibson, known as, although he was a former, you know, he's a guy that played receiver in college, converted to running back, known more as a third down type back, a pass catcher, more of a finesse back. He was actually the more physical of the two, although both of them had good games. Stevenson ends up 21 for 81 with a touchdown. Antonio Gibson, though, 11 carries, 96 yards, including a 45-yard a career high run in the second half after he should have absolutely been stuffed for a loss. I think it was Boye Mafe that whiffed on that tackle in the backfield. He then runs for 45 yards, 185 total rushing yards for the Patriots today. Mike McDonald was adamant after the game, simply saying that can't happen. We have to fix that. One of the things, and you heard it in that comment, that I love about Mike McDonald, the more we get to know him, his demeanor in the way that he approaches his answers and the way he talks about what happened on the field is he's very blunt. He's very honest. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. At one point he was asked about how did Byron Murphy play today? And he said, I don't know. Going to have to look at the tape. I expected the run defense to be better. Not a direct indictment of Murphy, but his answer was, look, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions until I see what his responsibility was in that. It was frustrating. I'm excited to go back and watch the rewatch of this one. Much more excited since they pulled out the win, obviously, to see, they talked a lot about how tackling was so good last week, especially in the open field, although Adam Dirty said, we missed 8 or 9. He wasn't happy about that. I think there were a lot of missed tackles. In that last quote from McDonald, you heard him say, I wish we could have got the quarterback on the ground more often. And indeed, 3 sacks on the game. But I don't have the QB hit numbers here overall of how many times they got to the quarterback, made contact with the quarterback, and Jacoby Brissett was able to shake out of what was happening. The Seahawks led 17-13 at halftime. And a real key, I thought a real important part of this game, and McDonald talked a little bit about it afterwards, was and another clue, just another piece of evidence of what type of coaching staff this is and how they're going to execute moving forward, was how they managed the end of the first half. It was a crucial time where we knew that the Seahawks deferred after winning the toss at the beginning of the game, and so they would get the ball to start in the second half. And they had 2 opportunities to score at the end of the half. Let me go back to my notes here because I took notes on just about every play. And there was some good and bad on both sides of the ball, but there was 3 minutes left when the offense took over with all 3 of their timeouts left. Good chance, plus the 2-minute warning. Good chance to go down, get a score, and then try to double up, come out at halftime, and score again on the first drive of the second half. But they just didn't execute well, and they couldn't kind of get out of their way. There was a big pass play to JSN, who had a big game, but there was a penalty on the play, offsetting penalties on the play. And then on the next play, Anthony Bradford with a personal foul. That set them back. And then, the penalty really killed that. So they had to give the ball up, and then you're worried about, okay, now what if New England goes down and scores? But then a great punt by Michael Dixon pins him inside the 10, and then they start to dial the pressure up a little bit. And on 3rd and 7, rushing just 4, they get pressure on Brissett and ruin that drive. So they get the ball back with 40 seconds left. D. Williams, after a uneven first game where he had the muffed punt for the turnover, obviously his rookie debut, and then he had the fair catch where he let the ball hit the ground behind him. It's downed inside the 5. That cost the Seahawks on their way to getting 2 safeties in the first half against the Broncos last week. But this time, a nice punt return gets him to the 50. Now we're in business. 40 seconds left. You got your timeout. You got a chance to kick a field goal. There were some breakdowns. There was a safety blitz on the Patriots' part for a sack. And then 16 seconds left, no timeouts. The Seahawks, just the way they managed the clock, they decided to throw one more play. And just as the announcers on the Fox broadcast were saying, there might not be enough time with 16 seconds left to throw the ball over the middle of the field because you don't have any timeouts. You got to go up and spike it and get your field goal team out there. And they did just that. And they hit DK Metcalf over the middle. They are able to get up, execute it perfectly, spike the ball in plenty of time. Jason Myers gets a field goal to end the half and make it 17-13. And then they avoid giving up the score to the Patriots, and then they come out in the second half with the ball. Clock management, situational management is something that the Seahawks coaching staff just hasn't been very good at over the last few years, to be honest. This team they rely heavily on analytics. We talked about that last week. Mike McDonald did with the decision to go forward on the 4th and 1, said maybe game context being taken into account, wouldn't have done that again so soon in the game. Or not, it wasn't a 4th and 1. They went for 2. He talked about that a little bit at the end of this game. They went forward on 4th down once after a long drive, got stuffed to keep the Patriots close. And then another time later in the game where they had an opportunity for a 4th and 1, they decided not to go for it. And they went out twice, tried to get the Patriots jump off sides, called another timeout, went back out again, looked like they were maybe going to go for it and be really aggressive, ended up just trying to draw them off again before taking a delay game penalty before a field goal. So we're starting to see some of the tactical thinking on the part of the Seahawks coaching staff. The other part of this game that I thought was really key is Ryan Grubb's continued approach to making in-game adjustments. We saw it last week in the Broncos game when the pass protection was so horrific early in the football game, and it got better as the game went along. This game, it was more a situation where early on it was evident they couldn't run the football. Ken Walker out of this game, ruled inactive before the game, just never was able to get back from that oblique injury all week. There was a report from Ian Rappaport this morning that it may be weeks, not necessarily because it's a significant injury, but because the Seahawks just want to be extremely conservative and careful. So when they get Ken Walker back, they don't want to aggravate that again. They want him back for good. Zach Charbonnet is not a popular figure among Seahawks fans today. A lot of slow developing inside runs out of shotgun that didn't seem to play into what Charbonnet can do well. He's more of a north-south runner. It just looked, man, I'm trying to reconcile in my head that what I saw on tape coming out of UCLA, what we even saw at times last year. I'm thinking especially of the game at San Francisco where he had some dynamic runs. Just his foot quickness today, especially in the backfield, getting started, just seemed to be lacking, to the point that a lot of you were calling for someone else to get carries. I did too on Twitter, but I said Kenny McIntosh. A bunch of you wanted them to just skip right over McIntosh and go to George Halani, which would be an interesting choice. McIntosh was the most dynamic runner in the preseason by a mile, and really good between the tackles. It just never got going until late, the last drive when they needed it most. Charbonnet got an outside run for about 9 yards, almost made a first down out of it. That was key. But what I appreciated is he kept going back to it enough just to keep the Patriots honest. So we already saw the adjustment from Mike McDonald and Adam Dirty to take away Hunter Henry. But I felt like throughout the game, there were all these little micro adjustments from Ryan Grubb. And what I mean by that is I'm thinking about all the times that I've been upset with play calling and offensive coordination over the last 10 years, going all the way back to Darrell Bevell at times, where it just seemed like they were so stuck on a plan that even though the other team made it clear they weren't going to be able to execute that plan, they just kept, they never deterred from it. Adjustments aren't all about what happens at halftime. Mike McDonald said himself last week, halftime adjustments are overrated. There's not much time to get things done. It's only 10 minutes. But I felt like there were all these little moves throughout the game from Grubb where the analogy that popped into my head was it's like he's just constantly poking, poke, trying to find the weakness, right? It's like the old analogy about the dike with 11 holes and the kid has 10 fingers. Imagine that same dike and you're poking around trying to find a weak spot because you want to break it. It just feels like he does that. He tests every level of the field. He runs, outside runs, little flat passes, throws over the middle of the field, runs between the tackles, had some crossing routes, tons of motion. We saw more motion, I think, out of Ryan Grubb today than we did last week. It'd be interesting to see the analytics on that. Take some deep shots, even against, Christian Gonzalez facing DK Metcalf one-on-one. And I think we see the benefits of that. It feels like as games go on now, there are more opportunities to make plays because the other team has to defend the entire field. They get the deep shot early for the touchdown to DK Metcalf on what was a broken communication in zone coverage where they were playing cover 0, and Gonzalez got mixed up with the safety on his side, let DK run free. But there was a shot in the second half where, Gino just threw the ball up, even though Gonzalez was in good coverage position, and just allowed DK a chance to make a play. A couple of shots like that to JSN in this game as well. that even if they're not open, take those shots. You're going to stress the defense. You're going to stretch that out. As far as the lack of ability to run the football, there was one 3rd and short, or was it? No, it was the 4th down play in the first half that got stuffed. I think for a loss of 1, actually, with Charbonnet. And everybody wanted to blame the interior offensive lineman for it. But someone posted that play right away on Twitter. I watched it 20 times in a row, and the guards and Connor Williams did their job. It was some combination of the tight ends allowing that free rusher to come in from the backside and get Charbonnet. You had 3 tight ends in the game. They sent one in motion. I think it was Barner in motion. He took out a guy right as the free rusher was running behind him. So I don't know if that was if Barner was picked the wrong guy, or if it was Jake Bobo who was going to the second level to take on a linebacker. If he missed it, it was the guy from the backside that blew that play up. Guards did their job just fine. But when asked about, listen for the tone and the way McDonald answers this question, because this is what he had to say about the running game.
On our end, I don't know, but I have to look at the tape and see what's happened on some of the blocks. But, if it's not there and you're able to throw the ball, then, whatever it takes to win the game. So I thought we did that, but we'll go back to the tape and figure it out. But, they have a really good front, and they do a good job in the run game. Numbers back it up.
See, I like his answer to that. It's not a failure to not be able to fix the running game in game. And again, I don't think they gave up on it. They still kept it honest. They just didn't go empty backfield for the entire half and try to air it out. We've seen that in the past. But he says, hey, sometimes it's going to happen. It's a football game. They took our runaway. We figured out another way to do it. We beat him throwing the football. Geno Smith on the day, 33 out of 44, 327 yards, 1 touchdown. He was just consistent all day long to all levels of the field. He was in command. A couple times he had to move in the pocket. Took 3 sacks this week, but I would imagine that when we see the pass block win rate numbers midweek, that they'll be better than they were last week. Felt like pass protection held up a little more consistently. They had a ton of trouble, as we talked about in the preview leading into the game, with Keon White, second-year player out of Georgia Tech, a guy that you should all know his name because so many people had him ticketed to be drafted by the Seahawks last year. 7 tackles on the day, 2 solo, 1.5 sacks. One of them, he just absolutely beat Connor Williams one-on-one and got by him, a little individual effort. But I'll say this too. If for those of you out there who like to go back and watch games again, whether it's the broadcast replay or the all 22, go back and focus on, I'll be interested to watch Laken Tomlinson, but Anthony Bradford, for as much ire as he's getting from so many fans, did some good things in this game. And, they gave Christian Haynes some reps. It was late first quarter, early second quarter, gave him some run at right guard for 1 drive. It was 3 and out, and he allowed inside pressure that almost got Geno Smith sacked. It almost turned into an interception. Guy hit Geno's arm just as he was letting it go and into a group of New England defenders. Fortunately, they weren't able to come up with it. And then Bradford came back in. I think it was on the very next drive, maybe inspired by the fact that he's in a competition. And he absolutely obliterated Keon White, dominated him physically down the field, and drove him into the ground. You can see why Bradford for right now is the choice, because he is capable of absolutely physically dominating his guy. So pass protection, I thought, as a whole was better. The offense obviously was able to function with it, with the game Geno had, and then using his 2 best outside receivers. And to me, this is another thing. We learn more about this team each week, right? We're learning a lot about Ryan Grubb week in, week out. The big question, can what he did at Washington and before that Fresno State translate to the NFL? He had all that success with Michael Penix and his receivers at Washington the last 2 years. Can he do it again? And going into this game, a lot of people thought, well, chance for, DK Metcalf to step up against what some people believe already is an elite young cover corner in Christian Gonzalez. Jonathan Jones on the other side, although we expected Gonzalez to be the matchup, a little closer size-wise to DK. And he had the one long one for 56 for the touchdown, but ended with 10 catches for 129 yards and a touchdown. Had a couple of drops, including one big one that would have been a first down on a 3rd and long over the middle. what I would call an egregious drop. But as I have said for years, for those who look at the drop numbers and some of the advanced stats and use it as fodder to dismiss DK's status as an elite wide receiver, always comes up big in crunch time. Did it again today, even when covered by Gonzalez. Had another big first down conversion. Finishes with 10 catches for 129 yards. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, a career high 12 catches in this one for 117, long of 24 on 16 targets. He had one as well that was in his hands. It would have been a tougher catch. Would have been a nice play downfield. It was a drop. He had another play. It was a first down conversion. I think it was a 14, 15-yard gain, where initially we all got excited because it looked like he had the face mask and it was going to get tacked onto that. But then there was, I think that was the Anthony Bradford penalty, right? Illegal formation or something like that. Or was that the personal foul? Anyway, big game for JSN. And so as a result, Tyler Lockett, only 2 catches today for 15 yards, although one of them was for a big first down late in the game when he needed it most. Caught both his targets. So just, more vertical routes from JSN and more middle of the field stuff than we saw with him, especially early in the year last year from Shane Waldron. Let's check in and see what we got over on YouTube. Hey, guys. Also, I talked about first place, right? So the Seahawks 2-0, obviously. San Francisco losing today in Minnesota by a score of, what was that, 27-20, I think, right? 23-17, final score. They were down big early, came back with 10 points in the fourth quarter, ended up losing. So they dropped to 1-1 on the tail of finding out they put Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve. He's going to miss 4 weeks. Would be back technically just in time for the Seahawks Thursday night game, but won't get a full week of practice that week. So unlikely that the Seahawks would see McCaffrey in that game. And then as we speak, the Cardinals are laying, my goodness. It was 24-3 at halftime. Cardinals over the Rams. It is 34-3 at the moment. Kyler Murray, 15 out of 18, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison, if you're a fantasy manager of Marvin Harrison Jr. like I was week 1 and you're disappointed by the 1 catch for 4 yards, 4 catches, 130 yards, 2 long touchdowns today. James Conner, almost 100 yards rushing. Matthew Stafford not doing a whole bunch. And that defense that we thought was going to be a little bit of a Achilles heel in Arizona has held Kyron Williams to 17 yards on 10 carries. So the Seahawks, barring a miracle comeback by the Rams, are going to be all alone in first place in the NFC West at 2-0 with everyone else tied at 1-1. Let's see what we got. American says we could go 5-0. So when you look at next week, now the Seahawks come back home to Lumen Field to play the Dolphins, who obviously on Thursday night lose to Tua Tagovailoa to another concussion. No word yet on the severity of that or specifically how long they think the timeline is going to be. He hasn't been placed on injured reserve yet. But Mike McDaniel says they'll move forward with Skylar Thompson. Well, I'm no doctor, you guys, but unlikely to play against the Seahawks next week. That certainly changes the dynamic of that game. And then the week after that, you go to, that's the Lions game on Monday night, right? Let's go through the schedule here. You would think that I would have it committed to rote memory, but Dolphins at home, then at Lions on Monday Night Football, and that is a Lions team that lost to the Buccaneers at home today, 20-16. So that Tampa Bay offense really slowing down the Lions. Jared Goff threw for 307 yards, but got picked twice. Jahmyr Gibbs ran for 84 yards. David Montgomery, 35. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11 catches, 119 yards, but they were able to kind of hold that offense in check. despite a massive day from Aiden Hutchinson on the other side of the football. So yeah, and there's Giants after that, right? Giants at home, going into the Thursday game against the 49ers. So again, though, man, I'm glad I don't bet. I've always sucked at it, but I think I'm just too realistic too. The NFL is too good. The coaches in this league are smarter than ever, I think, across the board. There's more information. There's more analytics available to them. Just the technology and the film study and the way they're able to look at games and prepare for games. You just never know one week to the next. And we still really don't know who the Seahawks team is. But I think today there's a word that stands out. I used it in the thumbnail or in the description of the video. It's a word that Pete Carroll used to use a lot. It's a word that Jake Dickert used yesterday in describing a very similar feeling type of win. I was at Lumen Field yesterday to watch that Apple Cup to what the Seahawks did today, where they looked like the better team, but the game was in question the whole time. And there was times in the game when it was in doubt. And yet they end up pulling it out at the end. And Jake Dickert used the word grit. And I consider this a very, very gritty team that does speak to the personality of the team. And I think the fact it came against another team that's trying to establish the exact same identity and culture from a guy that knows it well in Gerard Mayo can't be understated. Do not just dismiss this game as, oh, they beat the Patriots and it's Jacoby Brissett. It's always tough to win in the NFL. It's always tough. It's especially tough to win on the road in the NFL. By the way, Mike McDonald's first trip to the East Coast to play a 10 a.m. game used to be a problem for the Seahawks before Pete Carroll came along. Mike McDonald keeping all of those practice parameters in place that Carroll used to find success traveling to the East Coast. 1-0 now in those games. Ugly game, but 2-0 is 2-0 from Brendan Gallinaw. Indeed, could not agree with that more. Carly Perkins, a little bit more optimistic today, says we're going 17-0, guys. 17-0. So much to the chagrin of the old Miami Dolphins that would be really disappointed about that. Corduroy Pillows. Corduroy Pillow. Okay. Says awesome win, but I'd love to see us improve on our run defense. Absolutely. Mike McDonald talked from the day he was hired about wanting to build a run wall. And you could see there were times in this game where, this wasn't an example of a team that's just really good at running the football going, hat against hat. They went jumbo a lot. We saw a lot of 13 personnel or 12 personnel, and they'd bring Caden Wallace in, who's their backup offensive tackle, actually had to play later in the game when they had an injury there. They'd bring him in like the Seahawks used to do with George Fant as an extra jumbo tight end. And they just said, we're going to come right at you. There was a period in the third quarter where the Patriots got a little pass heavy. And I think Brissett threw it like 7 out of 8 times. And the Seahawks were starting to get pressure, starting to get after him with 4 rushers. Derek Hall, another outstanding game, left for a little bit to get evaluated for a concussion. Thankfully, he came back. Had another sack. Boye Mafe was a tear off the edge before he had to leave with an injury late. Mike McDonald, by the way, says doesn't look too serious. Looks like his knee just got banged, a little contusion there, but no ligament damage. Also said that Jerome Baker, who had to leave the game when he aggravated his hamstring, seemed okay after the game and was probably going to be okay. But where's that stat? I was going to look for that one more time and see. Leonard Williams with a sack and a half, Byron Murphy with a half sack, and Boye Mafe with the other one. I thought Derek Hall had a sack, but he was in on the quarterback a number of times. And let's see his numbers on the day, just two tackles, but he seems a lot more involved with that, especially when Mafe went out. He's just a real physical presence on the edge there. Rayshawn Jenkins actually led the Seahawks with 9 tackles today. Terrell Dodson with 8. Julian Love with 7. Devin Witherspoon was 7, and Tyrese Knight, who had to come in when, although a couple of times, I'll have to check the replay, but I swear I saw 3 linebackers on. That was the point I was meandering to, was that one of the adjustments we saw from McDonald when they realized they were having trouble stopping that run and that the Patriots were going to go so large on offense is start using their bigger guys more. We saw more snaps from Jonathan Hankins. I think, than we did last week. And then we saw them get out of nickel at some points and bring Knight in as a third inside linebacker. And then Knight had to play primarily near the end of the game when Baker had to go out. But 7 tackles for Knight, 3 solo on that one. And then Jaron Reed quietly with 6 tackles as well up front. I think the personnel's there and the scheme is there. And I think that's something we heard a lot during the game. Like this was, or saw it a lot on Twitter, certainly, like same problem as last year. You know, if they can't stop the run, they're not going to win this game. They have to be able to slow down the run. I have more confidence, put it this way, that they can get that done this year than they did last year. Brendan says the Cards look really good this year. I'm more than happy with the 49ers losing. Yeah. Are the Cards, I mean, this is the question every week in the NFL, right? Are the Cardinals as good as they've looked so far? Almost beating Buffalo in Buffalo last week, looking good on offense, and then being explosive again against the Rams? Or are the Rams having a lot of problems right now? They got a lot of guys out with injury, especially along that offensive line. Puka Nacua being out. Interesting to see. I think that's a game that I usually don't watch full replays of opposing games, but I think I might have to do that with those two. Carly says this game shows we still have a ways to go. To me, isn't that the theme of the game? That there's things to clean up. There's some things that didn't go well, but we get to learn those lessons after a win. And they didn't let any of those shortcomings today ruin them. They didn't let any of those shortcomings beat them. They were able to overcome them and figure out a way. You know, it's like if you were to think of a baseball analogy, right? A guy that you expect to hit home runs, right? An Aaron Judge type. Sometimes you just got to move the runner over. And that's what you can do most in the moment right now to help your team win. Or you get a base knock the other way to drive a guy in from second. It's not always going to go to script. It's not always going to go the way you want it to go. And throughout the game, you're going to have to stay in touch with who you are, what your philosophy is, and who your strengths and weaknesses are personnel-wise. And today, the consistent factor throughout all of that, stopping the run, can't stop the run, can't run the football, dropped passes, lots of drop passes in the second half too. But it didn't deter this guy at all. This is Mike McDonald talking about, right? Where is it? Oh, not talking about Geno. This is, I had some sound here, and this is him talking about DK. I mentioned earlier how he had a couple of drops early, but he bounced back from that and was big when they expected him to be at the end of the game. This is McDonald on DK Metcalf.
You know, he started the game off with us, you know, on the deep pass down there when they were in 0, and kind of got us off and running on offense. I know he had a couple of drops, but coming back, making some critical plays. One where he leaped over the guy was incredible, and then having a couple big time catches over there in the fourth quarter and overtime. So not sure what his numbers were, but it felt like he had a great game.
And indeed he did. And again, those numbers, 10 for 129 with a touchdown, long of 56 on 14 targets. Question here from Richard. Why can't we ever have a blowout win? I get that sentiment. I do believe, well, there's 2 ways I would answer that. The first one is offensive line play has to continue to get better. And today it was the run game that wasn't effective, and you have to be able to stop the run. So I guess if you could boil it down, that's one of the reasons. If you're going to let the other team run the football consistently, you know, they averaged, where is that? Come on, ESPN. Why can't you format better? They averaged 5.1 yards per carry as a team, but when you take Brissett and JaMychal Hasty had a reverse. I mean, Stevenson averaged 4 yards a carry, Antonio Gibson 8.7. If you can do that to a team, then you stay on the field longer. New England did end up winning the time of possession game, and it just makes it harder for you to blow a team out. I think those wins are going to be more common moving forward than they have been in the recent past because it's a mentality difference. I think in particular, we're going to have one of those games where things are clicking a little bit more and the offense comes up against the defense that just doesn't have any answers for him. Ryan Grubb is the type to not take his foot off the gas. We will have one of those games this year where the offense is having their way and Grubb's just going to keep pouring it on. I mean, think back to some of those Husky games. I certainly do, because I remember vividly an Apple Cup 2 years ago in Pullman when the Cougar secondary just could not cover UW receivers, and their offensive line was giving Penix plenty of time to throw, and he just kept throwing daggers down the field the whole game, to the point that I was asking for mercy. I think those wins are going to come. It's just not where they are yet. Let's see what else we got here. It takes time to fix a run defense from James Reading. Indeed, I would agree. Nate Shute says the Mariners are up 5-0 with the bases loaded. Is that true? Let's check in on the Mariners. Was that an answer to my baseball analogy? Huh? Now it's 6-0. I don't know how many you follow the Mariners as well as the Seahawks, but just when you think it's okay to quit on the season, they suck you back in. And it's the old line from Dumb and Dumber, right? So you're saying there's a chance. Carly Perkins has another great point. It'll be interesting to see how good the Patriots are this year. I think they might end up being solid. That's another one. If I finish up this stream and tune into Twitter and see a bunch of fans dismissing this game as, well, it's just the Patriots, I would remind them, again, it's the NFL and you don't know. Maybe the Patriots are really good. Just like I was talking about the Cardinals-Rams game. Maybe this is a sign that there's been a little turning of the tide in the NFC West and the Cardinals are going to make a big leap this year. And that the Rams, some of their, they lost some great players over the last couple of years. Maybe that's harder to overcome than we thought. Some of their injury issues on offense, maybe they can't overcome that. Maybe the running game last year with Kyron Williams wasn't as legitimate as we thought, or teams have figured out a way to stop it. You just don't know. I know it can sound old and it sounds like a cop-out at times to say, each and every week we get more answers in the NFL, and sometimes you just don't know until you know. But I think that's more true in our case now than it has been in quite some time, because it is all new. This, as much as we all love what we're seeing out of Mike Macdonald, and as much as everybody almost universally thinks that this guy has what it takes to be a successful coach in the NFL, and that, there's enough talent in place in Seattle for them to establish things right away, that there are going to be weeks that we don't like. There's going to be weeks where it's really hard for me to talk about what we just saw on the field. And where the result isn't what we want it to be. But today was almost one of those days. But we still would have had a lot to talk about as far as what are we seeing? How are we seeing this team evolve? How are we seeing this team develop and come together? I'll keep reminding you that Greg Bell said when he was on the show 2 weeks ago, it's going to be a different team in November than it is in September. And he thinks it'll be a lot better team. We used Charbonnet the right way in the fourth quarter. Truth hurts. There was one play in particular, I'd have to go back and watch it, where I thought it was a quicker hitter. I was a little disappointed in the types of runs. I know Ryan Grubb said earlier in the week it's business as usual if Kenneth Walker's out. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they're different runners and you have to use them differently. If you want to try and establish a running game with Zach Charbonnet, first of all, as Mike McDonald alluded to, we got to go and see what's going on with the blocking up front, right? Why are those holes not being open? Are they stuck sort of in between trying to figure out if they want to run inside zone, outside zone, or more gap power stuff? I wonder if we'll hear this term this week in some form. We heard Ryan Grubb use this and Mike McDonald many times over the last 8 months when asked about the team before the season. I don't know what we're good at yet. I wonder if he would answer that the same way today, talking about the running game after he watches the film, that we still need to figure out how to match our personnel and the schemes that we have at our disposal to get the most out of that running game. But for as long as it's got to be Charbonnet, I think they need to go about things differently. I think handing him the ball out of shotgun 5 yards deep behind the line of scrimmage, Ken Walker can get away with that. And that works for him because his first step quickness and explosiveness, he can be almost at top speed almost immediately. Zach needs a little time to get going. I think he's more of a north-south runner. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more under center stuff, right? Maybe even use a fullback or some of that stuff we saw a couple of years ago with Tariq Young out of the backfield, or a guy like Brady Russell or AJ Barner. I just, that was my one thing today that I was most frustrated with is, McDonald said after the game, if you just keep running into a brick wall, you're not going to get very far. Like, again, to his point, you have to adjust. And they did that for the most part. And you just made the point that they used Charbonnet a little differently in the fourth quarter, but it took him 3 quarters to get there. And that was a little nerve-wracking there for a moment. Big Stone played well. This is Motive. Big Stone played well. Wonder if he can play guard when Fant comes back. He's never played guard in his life. I think there's better options there. I think you're either going to go with Haynes. And as the season goes on, if they get some more trust in some of those young guys, if Laken Tomlinson proves to continue to be a liability at left guard, then maybe Haynes ends up being your left guard if you think he's a weaker link than Anthony Bradford. But before they went to something like Stone Forsyth, I think McClendon Curtis, who was active for the game today, actually elevated from the practice squad, would be a guy that they would rather go with it at guard ahead of, an experiment like that. And maybe even ahead of LeMaya at this point because of his youth. Let's see. Truthhurst says, yeah, they used short passes to him and he took off. Yeah, I think Charbonnet's better in the run game. Get him in some space, and he's shifty enough. And at his size, he's pretty physical. Let's see. Carly says, hope K9's ready for the Dolphins, although I don't want to rush him. Same. Nate Shute said Bradford played fine outside the penalties. I think he had 2 penalties. They were both at crucial moments. Certainly something that they need to clean up moving forward. What else you got, guys? Oh, the blocked field goal. Thanks for bringing that up. Dune Moose from Julian Love. And I saw just before I went live, I saw a little comment from his post-game press conference where he said at the last second, he just, based on a hunch, he switched sides with Rayshon Jenkins and just wanted to come off of the right side. Something he saw, something he felt in the way the Patriots were lining up. He was able to get in there and block that field goal at the end of the half. That was huge in that game. So again, just another example of the type of plays you have to make when everything isn't pretty and you're not banging on all cylinders. But I'll tell you what, if we get many more of these types of games where they have to fight, scratch, claw to overcome their weaknesses, but they're able to eke out wins and beat teams in slugfests. At some point, the narrative then will have to become, among those that don't believe in Geno Smith, hey, this guy's pretty good. Like, he looked like a guy completely in control the whole game. And if his receivers had helped him out a little bit better in the second half, he might have had his first career 400-yard game. Like, I think that's coming. I think we're going to see that this year. And I think the evidence so far, he had the rough start in the first drive last week and he had the pick. But since then, second half last week, actually the last 3 quarters last week and this week, Geno Smith, absolutely outstanding. A quarterback rating today of 103.1. Yep. Truthhurst says Geno was a stud. And Josh Miller says, love how Lockett 2 games in a row comes clutch when we need him. McDonald just, again, when somebody asked him about Lockett again, he kind of almost half laughed. Like, yeah, I think his comment was, they told me about him before I got here, and that's just all he does. He just comes up in big moments all the time. You can tell that McDonald, even though he's a defensive guy, really enjoys some of the toys that he has as his disposal as a head coach on offense. 41-10 now. The Rams losing to the Cardinals. Guys, that's all I got. Let me just make a quick check of Twitter here and see if my Twitter does not seem to be refreshing. That's why. Just see if there's any updates. Hold on here. Everything going right for the Cardinals today. James Conner fumbles as he's going in the end zone, but Trey McBride recovers it for a touchdown. Big day for the Cardinals. Just want to check in on some of the Seahawks beat writers and see if there's any updates out of the post-game press conferences. Let's see. Doesn't look like anything outside of the fact that, again, Mike McDonald's saying that he doesn't think it's serious with Boye Mafe, and he doesn't think it's serious with Jerome Baker. Says Geno Smith gets the game ball today. Calls it the dynamite game ball. It was fun. It was fun because of the result. But again, I think today I'm having a hard time putting my words to it. But it just felt like the kind of game that even if they had lost, I would have felt okay talking to you right now about it, because I do think that there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to continue to be, right? And the more and more this coaching staff has a chance to work with this team, I think the better they're going to get. So, and in what might be a much more wide open NFC West than any of us thought, are things going to shift over the next 6 weeks, 2 months? There was a period last year where the 49ers lost 3 in a row heading into that one game against the Seahawks, gave them a chance to get in the division lead. And then the 49ers really established their will the rest of the year and showed us who they are. Is that going to happen again? Or are there some weaknesses? Is that roster in San Francisco that's so top heavy with superstars, but maybe missing some middle-class depth there, starting to catch up to them? Is it just the absence of Christian McCaffrey? Is he that big of a difference maker? Are teams figuring out a little bit better way to attack Brock Purdy? Are the Rams just having a bad week? Or are those offensive line issues and the injuries real? Is that young defense going to just take a much longer to come together than we thought? I mean, I love their draft, but at the end of the day, they're all young guys over there. And Aaron Donald's not in a Rams uniform anymore. So let's just check in on that score one more time before we shut it down here. 41-10. And Kyler Murray only 266 yards passing, but just really efficient. A rating of 58.3, almost 158.3, almost a perfect rating. James Conner with 122 yards rushing. Murray using his legs. Again, we didn't see a lot of that second half of last year, coming off the ACL, averaging 12 yards a carry. Hey, hats off to the Cardinals. Did the Seahawks a favor. Once again, little promotion here from my buddy Stephen Douglas and his band Stephen Douglas and Company. This song is called Dopamine. The album comes out on Spotify tomorrow, so check that out. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a bunch of stuff, playing around on some other people's live feeds. I'll be on the 12 Talk Pod with Josh and those guys across the pond. That'll be fun. And then hopping on again with Bryce and Ryan from the Hawks Own Rundown podcast tomorrow also. As far as this channel, be sure to hit subscribe, hit that bell so you always get notification of new episodes, and hit a thumbs up if you like it. If you want to support the show and me, all those different ways are down in the description. At Seahawks Forever is my Twitter handle. Make sure and join me there, and we'll talk again soon. Just enjoy your 2-0 Seahawks for the time being, and also tried not to make a big deal out of this today, but feeling pretty good about what I saw at Lumen Field yesterday. So I'm going to say a couple of things. One thing that I always say at the end of a show, and then something else I haven't said in a long, long time. Not since it was the Dan Cave show. If any of you ever watched my very first podcast. Forever and always go Hawks, but also go Cougs. We'll see you next time.